news will be, I'll just move this closer. Just have a bit of Space Association news. There's not a whole lot to talk about this day. There's a couple of exciting things though. And then some Australian space news, just 2 or 3 things that have popped up that I've noticed that looked of interest. And then we're going to have our main feature, which is the Australian Maria Zykaki. I apologise for that pronunciation, it's incorrect. From Saber Astronautics. First rule of being on microphone is turn your phone off. International space news with Angelo De Grazia. If my thing works properly. There we go. As you're not aware, we have obviously we have monthly meetings, which is one of which is you're attending today. So show with Andrew Rennie, which is broadcast on the website, and also we do a podcast where we edit out all the bloopers and upload it to the interweb. And if you just want to search up for that, the Space Show, it's not the Space Show. If you said 5 years ago Zoom has crashed, people look at you, what are you talking about? The Zoom has crashed. Are we on, Nash? Oh, okay. Beautiful. Okay, yeah, so as I was saying before, Zoom interrupted our proceedings here. The association is holding a special event to mark the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17, which is the last human landing on the moon. It took place back in December of 1972. Most of the people, well, most of the people in this room were there. A few of the people in the room weren't, so it'll be for you. It really did happen, by the way. Okay, so details of the event. It was a final mission in the moon program, Apollo Lunar Moon program. And we're going to be partnering again with our great friends out at the Sun Theatre in Yarraville. We've done a few things with them in the past. So the event will be on Saturday, the 10th of December from noon. And it'll probably go for about 3 or 4 hours. And it'll be a one-off event. And we've got some exclusive. Goes for about an hour and 40 minutes in total. We'll divide it in 2 halves. It's some spectacular imagery and so it's not going out at all? Or?
It's going out, but my laptop has crashed twice now. So,
so it's saying it's recording now. So you need to stop that and start it here, or how's it working?
Yeah. I think I have to allow you to record things.
For those who haven't met him, Ashley is our IT guru, but also he's the cause of all the problems most of the time as well. Don't tell him that.
Recording on this computer. Okay.
Good.
I guess so.
So, will people have heard the last thing I said out on the interweb? Okay, sorry everyone for that interruption. At least you got to go to the toilet and come back. That's good. All right, so yeah, so this presentation or the event on the 10th of December, it's going to be really really good, I think, and I think you enjoy it. For those of people that went to our 2019 Apollo 11 50th and the 2020 Apollo 13 special we had as well, I think it's going to be ideal for you people, space nerds as we know ourselves. So seating is limited. I was hoping to get the booking link from the Sun Theatre, and as of now, I still haven't got it. So I'm going to throw it out on the I'll put it out on an email distribution list on our SAA distribution list. I'll put it up on our Facebook page as well, so you can go there, purchase tickets, and we'll have a good time. So for those who are not familiar, the Sun Theatre is over in Yarraville. It's just over the other side of the Westgate Bridge. And if you've got a lunar rover replica like this one, please bring it along. We'd love to see it. That was one built by the Omega company who supplied the watches to the astronauts. So they built that back in the late 80s to commemorate probably the 40th anniversary or something of Apollo 11. I think it's a great project. So the rough program at this stage, well, the program at this stage will be an introduction just on the Apollo program, because there's going to be people there that wouldn't know how the Apollo system works, lunar modules, command modules, etc. So it'll be a little 101 of that, just a couple of minutes. Then I'm going to do a little part about what Australia contributed to the human space program. We partnered with NASA back then, and we continue to do that until today. In fact, we partnered with NASA on the Artemis launch and mission that's ongoing now. So that's quite interesting. Then we'll have part one of the film. We'll have a little interview. You can go get your chocolate top or whatever you fancy. I think it's licensed at cinema as well, although it will be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but whatever takes your fancy. And then part two will kick off at 1:30, and we'll finish it off at about 2:20, and we'll have a little Q&A if people want to ask questions. When we did the Apollo 11 50th, we didn't actually schedule this Q&A, but someone asked a question which turned into about a 30-minute Q&A with me and other people in the association coming along and answering questions. So it was really good. So we'll leave some time for that. And then we'll finish up at 3 o'clock, and depending on what people want to do, we might go to a local restaurant for dinner or something like that if people are interested. All right, that's enough nonsense about that. So once again, we're a non-profit group. We basically finance what we do, these events here, the radio station, special events that we do based on your subscriptions. So we do appreciate everyone or anyone joining, maintaining their membership, inviting other people. Completely voluntary. You can still come to any meeting you want. We don't ask for your stamp or your ticket. But if you like what we do, we'd appreciate that assistance. And we've got, looking around the room, we do have concession memberships as well for all of us people over who were born back in the 50s. All right, so once again, the meetings, fourth Monday of the month is the general formula, although next month will be a little bit different because fourth Monday of the month in December is in crazy time. So it'll be the 12th of December this time. So it's only 2 and a bit weeks away, isn't it? And then we've managed to secure the 23 agenda. So, once again, the formula of fourth Monday of the month will kick in. So January 27, 2023 will be our first meeting of the year. So the next meeting is, we normally have a trivia night, but I think we've run out of trivia. So we're just going to have more of a relaxed social night. I'm going to do the last of my countdown to the moon presentations, focused on Apollo 17. It'd be a more detailed presentation than the one I do at the Sun Theatre. But then we'll just do some whatever things, I don't know what we'll do. We'll think of some stuff, and you can suggest anything you like to. Maybe have a dart competition, I don't know, or if anyone's got a twister, we could bring the twister mat along and play twister, whatever you like to do. All right, so this a little bit of space news for you. Gilmour Space have completed their final qualification test for their Sirius hybrid rocket engine just recently. So it'll be the first Australian-made rocket in orbit that will be powered by that. And so it's a final qualification test. And they're hoping for an orbital launch next year. So it's a Queensland-based group, and it's developing the Iris rocket, a 3-stage rocket, and they say it's going to be very economical and reliable. So we'll see. We've been talking about Gilmore for a long time. So this is the Iris rocket. Well, it's a mock-up of it, a graphic of it. So a 3-stage rocket to low Earth orbit. So it's a single port hybrid rocket engine, this series, and developed by Gilmore Space. It uses liquid oxidizer and proprietary, must be Monday, solid rocket fuel. And it'll be the first attempt of an orbital rocket by an Australian design and constructed rocket. So that should be exciting to see. And I'll go through this. So they've chosen Bowen in Queensland to be their launch site, which is a little bit inland. So we'll see what happens there. The Bowen, what am I doing here? Yeah. So the Bowen orbital spaceport joins Wales Way Orbital Launch Complex over in South Australia, and also the Arnhem Space Centre up in Northern Territory. So Australia's really pushing ahead with launch sites. So speaking of Southern Launch, they have a partnership with AT Space announced on 14th of December. They're going to be a significant delay to their November, their projected or the planned launch of EcoChess VS03 rocket mission. So they had a big storm go through there, and it just damaged a lot of their assets, and so there was significant damage there apparently. So it's probably going to be some time. So this rocket, Kestrel 1, there's a picture of it there with the people they all set to light the candle a little while ago, but obviously didn't happen. We'll see the rocket reaching altitude 200 kilometres and peak of its 10-minute flight. So not an orbital rocket, but it's going to be doing some science there. Andrew, you just spoke about this person here, Dr. Megan Christian. She's been selected by the Europe to represent the UK Space Agency as part of the ESA's Europe Space Agency 2022 astronaut class. So she's an Australian citizen who grew up here and did her undergrad PhD at University of New South Wales. So the class that was intake was 5 career astronauts and 11 reservist astronauts and 1 para-astronaut. Were chosen from more than 22,500 eligible applicants. And so she will represent the UK. She was born in the UK and came to Australia when she was 5, lived in Wollongong and attended Illawarra Grammar School. Apparently she also spent time in New Zealand, according to Andrew. So she works at the Italian National Research Agency in Bologna at the moment. So good on Megan. Bit of local news, the Labor government's review into the coalition funding projects. Remember those car parks and shooting range projects that were so important to Australia? And well, the Labor government's launched a review into basically all grants. Unfortunately, that also includes space grants. So the National Space Mission for Earth Observation is a landmark space program for the Australian space industry. The program was announced in March of this year and was central to the Morris government's budget, led by the Australian Space Agency. The program would see Australia design and build 4 entirely Australian satellites for the purpose of collecting vital Earth observation data. Yes.
Minister Husak's office told me that...
I'm about to mention him, but go ahead.
Hi, Andrew Rennie. Minister Husak's office told me that there is no delay or cancellation to any of the projects that were approved by the Morrison government as far as space goes.
Oh, great. Oh, that's really good.
So that's what the office told me.
Well, that makes it a bit redundant. So thanks for the breaking news, Andrew. Andrew's got much better connections with the Australian Space Agency and the Australian government than I. But I grabbed this off a fairly recent news report saying that that they were basically looked like Ed Husak said that they were going to go through line by line through all commitments and by the previous government, and they believed, this report believed, it was going to be a 12-month delay. So that's good news, Andrew. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right, enough nonsense for me. I'm going to hand it over to Maria, who hopefully you'll introduce yourself and Ashley will flip over. I didn't. I should have.
Can you hear me?
Full detail. Yes, I can. We'll come back to that. Thanks, Maria.
And I think you need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Yep, just hang on 1 second. I'll let you know when we're ready for you. All right, I want to start sharing and I will spotlight you.
Can you see the screen?
Yep, we can see the screen and we can see and hear you fine.
Okay, great. Do you still see the first slide? Yeah, good. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present Saber and our programs on your monthly meeting. I am Maria Xigaki and I'm the Senior Business Developer at Saber Astronautics. A quick background about me, I'm a geologist, having over 25 years of experience in satellite imagery interpretation, remote sensing, and geographic information systems, which I have used for numerous applications related to geology, water resources management, disaster management, city planning, and many, many other things. And there was a point in my career that I thought that I had enough of Earth. I didn't want to do anything with Earth anymore. I knew what was happening from the satellite and below, and I wanted to know what is happening from the satellite and above. So here I am in the very exciting space industry. Saber Astronautics is a full-stack space mission operations services provider, offering services for space missions from the moment it's still a concept until the end of life. We operate both in Australia and in the US. We have 2 mission operations centers, 2 R&D laboratories, and a space hub. In Australia, we own and operate the Responsive Space Operations Centre in Adelaide, which was funded by the Space Agency and the government. Also, one of our 2 space R&D laboratories is located at Saber's headquarters in Sydney. In Sydney as well, we own and operate a space startup incubator, the Wolfpack Space Hub. I don't know if you have heard about that. I will tell you a little bit more about it on the way. In the US, we have a Responsive Space Operations Center in Boulder, in Colorado, and also a team based in the US Space Force Catalyst Campus in Colorado Springs. The Catalyst Campus, for those that are not aware, is responsible for the delivery of capability to the US Air Force and US Space Force. Our team is based there to support with updates and upgrades, an application that we have developed for them. Our mission is the democratization of space through ease of access, and that's why we are developing highly capable mission design and operation tools, which are easy to use. So what do we do when it comes to space operations? What does it include? We can help you design your mission and your spacecraft and integrate with it. We can test it before the flight. We support your launch operations, and we can fly you. The picture you see here on the left side is the Mission Operations Center in Adelaide at Lot 14. If you ever be in Adelaide, feel free to go and visit it. During the flight, we perform telemetry tasking and commanding, where we send commands to the spacecraft. We monitor its health. We move it if it's necessary. We predict the space traffic and manage the spacecraft accordingly. We monitor the space weather and we predict its effects. We monitor out of pattern of life threatening movements. We identify and analyze threats and others. And we also offer end of mission services by planning the orbit, checking for conjunctions and related risks. We have a long and proven heritage in machine learning applications, giving us the capability to offer solutions to any space operations problem. Currently, we apply machine learning on the spacecraft, on signals, and on space weather data. Our spacecraft diagnostic services are implemented using machine learning, where we can diagnose the health of any complex system and the real-time drivers affecting it for real-time actions. As it is known, delays in solving a problem on the satellite can cost millions of dollars in lost revenue. Our signal diagnosis capability, again by using machine learning, can detect electronic warfare threats or space weather events that might degrade the quality of the signal. This capability has both defense and commercial application, and it is developed for ground operations so far and is under development for space operations. Our space weather diagnostics can predict space weather events up to 3 hours, which allow us time to move and protect the spacecraft. In order to offer all the services I just mentioned, we have developed a world-class 3D visualization platform called PIGI. PIGI is a mission design and operation software specifically engineered for ease of use, able to transform large data packets and complicated space telemetry into simple, appealing visuals. PIGI is integrated with live data feeds and other system alerts, is agnostic and can connect with any satellite, any ground or space-based sensor, and any ground station. We have a marketplace with space domain data and ground stations providers that we make available to our customers to select for their missions, like Atlas, KSAT, RBC Signals, Amazon, and we're in discussions with many others. The Space Cockpit, the product on the right, is an application for space domain awareness and traffic management developed by Saber Astronautics by using some of PIGI's capabilities. We militarized and customized them, transporting them into a tool for warfighters at the tactical edge. The Space Cockpit is used by the US Space Force in the classified secret and top secret networks. It is used for tracking and monitor of space objects, for missile warnings, GPS navigation, and other uses of interest to the Department of Defense, to the US Department of Defense. So what is happening in the Australian Responsive Space Operations Center? From Australia, we operate satellites from anywhere in the world. Our most recent bird is a 2-tons industrial next-generation telecommunication satellite. This is the AST Space Mobile's flagship, the Blue Walker 3, the first of 160 satellites that this constellation will include. This is the first 5G satellite in orbit at the moment, with the largest antenna array ever built so far. It is fully deployed and it is 65 square meters. Also from Australia, we lead the Pacific Regional Cell of the world's largest space domain awareness and traffic management exercise, the Spring Advanced Concept Training. It is known as SACT. For those that are not aware, this is a joint civilian-military exercise which was initiated by the US Space Force and runs globally for about a week. During this exercise, over 200 companies and military personnel from the 5 Eyes countries connect to us and showcase their capabilities. By having 2 mission operation centers, one in Australia and one in the US, and having the capability to offer 24/7 follow the sun space mission operations, and because of our proven via the SACT exercises capability and experience in space domain awareness and traffic management, the Australian Mission Operations Center covers the night shift for the Joint Task Force Space Defense Commercial Operations Cell, known as JCO. The JCO is responsible for executing control of space defense and space domain awareness units to protect and defend US space capabilities. So during their night, we monitor their assets for them and act accordingly if it's necessary. What else is happening in Australia? As I mentioned earlier, we own and operate the Wolfpack Space Hub. This is a joint venture between Saber Astronautics, bringing expertise, accreditation, global relationships, and connections with both US and Australian Department of Defense, and TCG Group, a global player trusted by governments with over 150 businesses built so far and several billions won deals. The Wolfpack is a space hub, a space incubator, with a mission to incubate early-stage Australian upstream space startups from concept to on orbit, whilst we help with the development of the Australian space industry and sovereignty. This is a very busy slide, just because there are actually many things that we are doing for our startups. The hub offers to startups space-specific support and training, to test their hardware in space, to have successful missions, and to develop further their technical readiness capability. We have available a prototyping laboratory for them. We offer training and seminars aiming to develop their business skills and help them become successful business people, apart from successful engineers. We connect them with our global network and our global industry relations and give them paths to export their products, like the collaboration with the Catalyst Campus and the ongoing program we ran last year during the 37th Space Symposium in Colorado. Excuse me. We also organize networking events with the industry and with defense, where they promote their capabilities. We organize investors pitch days where they can connect with investors. We actively chase customers together, and we hunt as a pack where it is applicable. And that's why we name the hub under this name, Wolfpack. And we guarantee a revenue within a year in the hub, and we are building currently an investment fund to support them further. We have 4 startups at the moment. Saber Space, they are developing next generation space robotic arms. Metacosmos, they are developing digital bioastronautics and advanced spacesuits. Spiral Blue, they are developing edge computing and next generation Earth observation services using artificial intelligence aboard the spacecraft. And Dandelions, developing orbital re-entry vehicles for time-sensitive deliveries, with their first use case to deliver portable telecommunication towers, which can restore communications during a disaster like a bushfire. And that was the last slide about Saber and Wolfpack, and I'm happy to take you through our recent initiative, which is the first in Australia Astronaut Program. A bit about Axiom. In February 2020, NASA selected Axiom Space to provide at least one habitable commercial module to be attached to the International Space Station, as the agency opened the station for commercial use. Axiom, whose leadership has been involved in every ISS mission since the program's inception, took on this challenge by supporting expanding utilization of the ISS today. At the same time, they created the first international commercial space station to later host government astronauts, private companies, and individual explorers. Following their mission to make low orbit accessible to anyone, in 2022, Axiom successfully completed the first private mission to the International Space Station and have set to launch the first commercial space module, the Hub 1, in 2024, with more modules to come. Apart from the opportunity that Axiom gives to civilians to access low orbit and experience space, R&D on board the ISS National Lab is the most promising environment for innovation and problem solving since the internet. It may provide insight into research questions that have eluded traditional laboratory experimentation and offers an unparalleled opportunity to investigate how gravity and the extreme environment of space influence observation in the physical and life sciences, exploiting these effects to understand basic phenomena and advance commercial pursuits. Areas of interest currently are human health, biosciences and biotechnology, energy and biofuels, physical and material sciences, engineering, research and technology, Earth observation, space imaging, and major space infrastructures and more. In the beginning of 2021, Axiom approached Saber for a collaboration that would include sending Australian citizens to space. However, we didn't just want to send some wealthy people in space. Instead, we wanted to involve all Australians and the whole Australian industry and offer them the opportunity to access the ISS and the R&D laboratory. Orbiting Earth at an altitude of 250 miles, the ISS presents one of the greatest technical and diplomatic feats in human history. It has hosted professional astronauts and thousands of scientists and scientific projects and other programs. Therefore, we wanted to enable everyone in Australia to access the orbiting microgravity laboratory and develop new generations of space-developed products for human health, materials, electronics, cleantech, and more. So we initiated the first formal astronaut program for Australia. The program has 4 phases. Phase 1 includes the products call to identify which products and experiments will take part in the astronaut program according to specific selection criteria, with workshops to run in every state soon. Phase 2 includes the astronaut call to select the Australian who will travel to ISS. Phase 3 includes the training of the Australian, and phase 4 includes the flight to the International Space Station. The desired goal is to attract around, can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? Because there was a blackout on my screen.
No, we can still see and hear you, so that's fine.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so the goal was is to attract around 30 projects that would involve the industry and the academia with a budget between 1 to 5 million each, which will spend 30 to 60 days at the International Space Station. At the moment, we are during the first phase, and we have already engaged with the industry, the governments, and the academia, and we have released the call for projects. We have received 5 proposals, and we're expecting another 2. We have performed a preliminary assessment to make sure these projects can run in the microgravity laboratory, and we are now planning workshops to meet with the teams and discuss the details of the proposals, identify partnerships, and explore funding mechanisms. Excuse me. We will then proceed with development and production of the programs and finalization of the programs that we will send in space. The phase 2 is the call for astronauts, which will include a call to select the astronaut that will go in the International Space Station, the selection of the astronaut. There will be a pre-training in the country. There will be a NASA level training by Axiom, which requires 13 months to start 13 months prior to the launch, and then we will have the launch. This is a timeline for phase 1. Call for proposals. It was in July. We are now in the secondary assessment until March 2023, and we are aiming to fly in Q1 or Q2 in 2024 as per Axiom's plans. If you know anyone that would like to fly or has a proposal or a product that they want to send in space, let us know. We are about to make some noise about it because we found out that the industry doesn't really know. Not many parts of the country have reached the call. So feel free to send them our way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate that. I was actually online with Jason held CEO's presentation on this subject about 6 months ago. And I just want to clarify with you a thing that I picked up from Jason. I don't believe Saber is proposing to fund these projects or flying this astronaut, but you're going to help to facilitate the process to go ahead and do that, and obviously meeting certain milestones along the way. Is that correct?
Yes, that is very correct. Even Saber is doing all this voluntarily. We call everyone that would like to take part and help with this project. And as Jason says, usually collision of the willing. The companies need to have funds to support their projects. We will definitely keep an eye on the Australian Space Agency's announcements because they initiate an astronaut program. And as far as we know, they will have a number of grants that will be associated to that to support an Australian astronaut program. So we keep an eye on that. And then we are open to investors. We are open to anyone who would like to support and actually gather the large amount to get that ticket to send all those projects in space.
Fantastic. And I believe one of the criteria for the astronauts that you're going to select, they have to be bald and wear glasses. So I'm halfway there. I'll open up the room for any questions. If you want to ask a question, please come up to the microphone. And if there's any questions online, put it in the chat and Ashley, you will let me know. I've actually been over to the site at Lot 14 in Adelaide, and it's part of the Australian Space Agency's sort of little museum they've got there. And in one corner, or one half of the building, is this glassed off Mission Control Center. And it's everything you can imagine, as is that picture that Maria showed. That's not a graphic, a computer generated graphic, that's a picture of the real site. So, and they do real operations there.
Yes, and everyone can go and sit outside that glass. There is a little theatre and can monitor live operations. And actually the Discovery Center, which is part of the Space Agency, and the responsive space is in there, receives more than 2,000 visitors per month to see what the Space Agency exhibits in that Discovery Center. It's really interesting. If you be in Adelaide next time, please go and see it. It's worth it.
Fantastic. And do they ever sort of close that off if they're doing something for the military that people aren't allowed to observe? Or is there any time when that happens?
During the SACT, we might have cases that we might just close that glass. That glass becomes blurry, so people cannot actually see. Or there are other cases that a customer didn't want some information to go out to public yet, so we had to keep that glass again blurry, so people couldn't see.
Any questions? David? Yeah, we've got David Boyd coming up to the microphone. Just stand by, Maria.
Yep.
Hi, I've got a technical question. Your missions operations software is relatively new compared to similar operations around the world. And my understanding is you've had a lot of opportunity to innovate and use more recent technology. I'd actually heard that some of your mission operations software is based on gaming software engines. And I'm curious to know if that's actually the case.
Yes. Well, the software is getting newer and newer every day because we build more and more capabilities every day. But the heritage and the experience of the company is more than 14 years old. And the experience of the founder is more than 25 years old. Yes, we want to make it very easy to use and very easy to access. That's why we are using gaming technologies. So people feel like they are playing a game. It's a 3D visualization system, very capable with easy to use capabilities. That's the point. We had, when we gave the Space Domain Awareness Space Cockpit tool to defense in the US, their comments were things that we needed to get training for months in order to perform them. We can now just get the training in a couple of weeks and be able to perform the same and more capabilities. So this is the secret behind the tool, to be easy and to be based on the newest technologies available.
Thank you.
Looks like that's it for the moment. Oh, hang on, there's a question. Future of the International Space Station, is it going to be dismantled at some stage in the near future? I'm not sure whether you have inside knowledge on that.
Axiom won that award to start at least with one module, but they have plans for many more. So the station will stay there, but the modules will be replaced by new modules, those that Axiom will develop on the way.
So they're going to attach those to the ISS, or it'll be a standalone space station?
No, they will attach to the ISS.
Okay.
They will remove old ones and they will attach new ones.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been chasing you guys for quite some time, and you're always traveling and doing stuff. So it's good. It's more important than what we do here. But we really appreciate you coming in. We'll make sure we share the information of your website with our members and on our social media. But thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too, Peter, and apologies for the delay.
Switch this back. I'm going to get Sally up now. Thank you so much. So we're just going to switch over the presentation shortly, but we're going to have a special VIP guest who have finally, well, we believe we've met once before, but I don't know. My memory's not that good. Sally Jones-Tyndall used to be with Virgin Australia, and she's going to give us a quick, she's a space nut, by the way, so that's why she's here. She's going to give us a quick overview of herself and some of the things she's done in the space field. So if you want to come up and have a chat, Sally. Good? Yep. Oh, there we go. So if you stand there and look at that.
No worries. Hello, everyone. It's a bit of a small world that when I started flying for Virgin Australia, that the president of the Space Association of Australia was one of my cabin crew, but who knew? As we always know in the world of aviation, that who makes the coffee is the most important person. So thank you, Pete. But effectively, I came to know this group because when the space shuttle blew up in 1986, I woke my parents up and said that I didn't think that that was going to happen if I was on board. That's very arrogant, and I still stand by that. But effectively, I did everything I had to do to be accepted into the shuttle program, including my aunt wanting to marry me off to an American to change my citizenship. And my partner sitting in the back of the room will be very disappointed to hear that because he's Australian. But effectively, when the shuttle program was grounded, I thought I was done and went and got myself a real job flying from A to B on a commercial airliner. And that was until 2019, when a company called Advancing X started up in direct competition to Saber Astronautics. But as Maria and Jason from Saber Astronautics will know, my colleague, Sammy Rains, who's dialing into this, hello, Sammy, we've rung Saber Astronautics and told them already that the position has been filled. So whilst Megan Christian was born in the UK, and we're very happy that she'll be wearing the Union Jack when she goes as an alternate, the position has been filled. I am born and bred Australian. I have not married an American to go into space. I have all the credentials. I am a test pilot and a behavioral psychologist. My colleague Sammy's in robotics, and we are here to say that Australia is here. We are on the map and we are going, and we will maybe not be on Hub 1, which, as Maria will attest to, may be automated and robotics, but certainly by the time there's Hub 4, we will be there and we will be going. And Enrico Palermo, that you guys know as the head of the ASA, was with Virgin Galactic, which is linked to Virgin Australia. And when Virgin Galactic got started, we had the opportunity to put our hat in the ring to be a Virgin staff member flying, and we still are, and we still are in communication with them. So despite the fact that COVID had me now working for a bank, and I know that some of you might think, well, how does a person who's currently in banking go to space? Well, Jared Isaacman, who's the head of Inspiration 4 and the Polaris mission, is the head of a banking program, isn't he? And he's doing quite well for himself. So when international flying stopped, I went and used some transferable skills. I'm now the head of high brand risk for ANZ Worldline Payment Solutions. And I have every intention of juggling those transferable skills to keep my education up and to keep my flying skills up and to represent Australia with my colleagues on Hub 1, 2, 3, or 4 for Saber Astronautics. My boss for Advancing X will now message me, which is why I've left my phone over there. We're attached to rectal probes. Whenever we promote someone else, they activate. So I will either go as a representative for Advancing X as well. So look them both up. But I'm here with my very supportive family, with the exception of my son, who's 8, and he's playing a computer game in the background because, like Alan Bean said, isn't it wonderful that our children don't think this is a big deal? And it's very humbling because I wake him up for SpaceX launches and he doesn't understand why I'm doing that. And that's why we're here, because it's lovely to live in a world where flying into space is no longer a big deal. And I love Saber Astronautics' philosophy, which is we can all go. You know, Hayley Arsenault was the first para astronaut to go. ESA cottoned onto that very, very quickly, and rightly so, because if any one of us, and I'm sure you all have read an Arthur C. Clarke novel, disabled people, it makes no difference once we're in zero gravity, right? So I'm certainly just happy to be here and happy to have been invited by Peter, and within the statute of my non-disclosure agreements, we'll be more than happy to answer any questions about what I'm up to in terms of my training. But rest assured, you will very soon see an Australian astronaut going to space wearing the Australian flag, born and bred in Australia, not having married an Australian citizen, to be allowed to go. And hopefully what I would love to see is Russians and Americans marrying Australians to get on board our program, because it's so darn good. So it'd be lovely to meet you all. And of course, anyone online, you probably all know me anyway. I'm not shy with this hair color, and please reach out and ask me any questions. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sally. I appreciate that. And by the way, you are disadvantaged because you're not bald and you're not wearing glasses. So I'm just going to put it out there. I'm sure you can be. It does not hard, I can tell you that. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we mentioned our Apollo 17 event here in Melbourne on 10th of December. In Canberra, some of the former tracking station staff and friends and associates who worked at Tidbinbilla and other places are holding a fairly low-key commemoration on the 8th of December. I believe it will start, I've lost the details straight away. I believe we'll start up there at about 9 o'clock. Do you want to talk about it, Len? Yeah, please. Here you go.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if Mike Dinner's in the audience tonight, but I had a long chat with Mike last week. Initially, I wasn't going to go up. Then I thought, you know, once in a lifetime, last of the Apollos, take a day off work, go up for the day. Okay. Yeah, okay. And so I started looking at it. First of all, flights were hard to come by and they were incredibly expensive. So I phoned Mike and ended up having a very long and fruitful chat with him. Basically, it's Mike Din and Colin McKellar have organised it by themselves. So I said, is the US ambassador going to be there? Any big deal? And they said they contacted the embassy. Feel free to jump in at any time, Mike, if you're listening. And Caroline will be out of the country or unavailable at the time, so she won't be there. So it's very low key. It's a trip to Honeysuckle, which for most of us know is an empty site, and then on to TID, where there'll be a brief lunch, nothing super duper fancy, and it's only a morning event. So it's only about a 3-hour deal. So given that I'm in Melbourne and given that it's hard to get flights and the flights you can get are incredibly expensive for most people, and I've decided to withdraw. So, but anyway, I'm sure to anyone in the Canberra area, go and support Mike and Colin. It is the 50th anniversary. Give it a go. But I don't think it's really logistically viable for out-of-state people unless you get in your cars and drive. But let Mike know very quickly. Okie doke.
Hey, Mike, if you want to say something, just unmute yourself. I think you can do that. Can you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, it's more or less that. We've got about 30 starters or thereabouts. Visit to Honeysuckle and showing of videos at the what's called the Namadgi Visitors Centre. Then on to Tidbinbilla, where we're going to have a special preview of a Keith Haberland Apollo 17 movie. We gather that's before it's even shown at Houston, so this is a special effort. And also, Colin McKellar is sort of one-on-one with Harrison Smith, and we're getting some sort of message, video from him. But as I said at the beginning, it is sort of low-key. Oh, there's 2 or 3 different events sort of commemorated here. There's the Apollo 17 50th, of course. There's the end of the JFK-inspired lunar program, and I was hoping that might have got the ambassador along, but anyway, she's out of town. And it's the very first track of the big dish at Tidbinbilla, the SS-43. And the fourth thing in all of this is probably the last thing that certainly I or a number of others will be involved in. So it's a sort of swan song of the reunions that we've generally had over the last, well, I think my first one was the 25th anniversary when I got John Young out, and we had about 400 in Canberra. That was about our peak time. That's about all. If there's any other questions, we've looked into streaming, and it's not practical from certainly not from the Namadgi Visitors Centre. So I'm afraid we can't do anything online, which I would like to have done. That's all.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Good luck with that all. We'll be thinking about you. Fantastic. All right, we're going to now switch over to Angelo De Grazia to give us his International Space News presentation.
That's not mine.
Hey?
Can you all hear me? Hey? Let's see how we go. Okay, not going. It's on.
Got it? Okay, how's that? We're on the mic. Okay, this is a bit of a misnomer. I thought it'd be a brief space news highlights, but it's not really brief. But but I'll go until Mike says stop. But this is the sort of major key space news of the current X month. And the first thing, most topical, of course, is Artemis 1. This is a bit of a journey, an end of journey for me, because as you know, I actually went in August, September to the Cape to watch it go up, but for various reasons, it didn't go up. Okay. So some of you will have seen these slides, but I flew from Melbourne through to Orlando, Florida on the 23rd of August. I got my credentials and I promptly went to the Cape the next day. And what used to happen is, because I was media, I went, essentially we had to assemble outside. We couldn't just drive in like the locals could at the Cape. So we used to take the bus with all the foreign correspondents. And we used to drive in there on the bus. And when you drive in and you see that, it kind of really blows your mind. And the first thing, of course, you look at is look to the east, and lo and behold, you'll see Artemis 1 standing there. That was a very familiar sight during that time. And there's the famous clock, not the old clock, but the new digital one. And this is a view of SpaceX's launch pads, actually, because they're in direct line of sight from the clock. This was the media center. You know, when you see all those NASA videos from after the launches and whatever, they're all in there, in that building. And this is the media room. And it was, of course, not that packed on that particular day, but you'd go outside and you'd meet certain people. Like this is Charlie. She's the launch director for Artemis 1. And of course, you meet other people in the media room and have a chat with them, and astronauts as well, Doug Hurley. So on Saturday, again, we went out and you meet other people too. Tim Dodd. He is a gentleman, though. He really is. Bit of a wacko when he's filming a launch, but he's a pretty cool guy. Of course, we drove out to the launch pad to set up the cameras. I didn't have a camera, but I got a free ride by getting to know somebody. Not what you know at NASA, that's for sure. But awesome, you know, we were about 400 meters away from the rocket. Okay, there I am, hot day, hot as, I got to tell you, and humid as. And this is kind of just gives you a little bit of perspective as to what it looks like. That's just a little pond, but if you get your camera right, it looks like a real big lake. That's pretty cool. And of course, you pass pad 39B. What's happened here? A, and the SpaceX launch pad. So the launch day, I'm building up to the launch, but you need to know a bit of background. This is the tortured history of the Space Launch System, and this just kind of amplifies it. But on that first day, the rocket was supposed to go out at 8:33 in the morning and had a 2-hour launch window. So we all got there, of course, at 1:30 in the morning in anticipation, and we kept our eyes glued to these screens, and it told us the sad story as things evolved, eventually led to a scrub on that particular day. The reasons for the scrub, the launch window was only 2 hours. Early morning lightning delayed the fuel. Fueling results in hydrogen leaks, went from auto to manual feed. They still hadn't got that process sorted out. Problem was fixed. Suspected cracks in the core stage was later identified as cracks in the insulation. And then finally, the killer was the RS-25 engine 3, didn't reach temperature, which even on that day, we knew this was a sensor problem. And sure as eggs, NASA never admits these things in the end, but that's what it was. So they had to go for another launch attempt. On the off days, I'd go take pictures of the rocket. Launch day 2, 2-hour window again. Again, looking at the same screens. And of course, scrub. Reason, launch window was 2 hours. Fueling results in hydrogen leaks. They went from auto to manual fill, but there was an incident, a particular incident that overpressurized the system. And I suspect that's probably what did Artemis in the first launch attempts. Anyway, so NASA announced it will repair the quick disconnect arm SLS rocket interface on the pad. So they want to have another go at it. So they repair on the pad. NASA decides to repair the hydrogen leaks on the pad. It would preserve the opportunity to launch in September. At that stage, they still thought they could launch in September. They thought they might have to roll back because they had to recertify the flight termination system and perhaps something else. So they weren't quite sure what was going to happen at this stage, but they would fix it on the pad. And one of the advantages of that was that you could actually do a wet fuel test on the pad. So on September the 22nd, they replaced the seals, and they still had hydrogen leaks whilst they were doing this, but they did come up with a gentler fueling process, which was adopted. And that was to hold true when they finally launched Artemis not so long ago. So this September the 25th, the launch was called off due to, mind you, a hurricane. And if you go to the Cape this time of year, you just see the hurricanes just build. The weather just changes by the minute. On the 27th, they decided that they were going to roll the thing back to avoid any damage. But I think that was one point. But the second point was that it allowed them to actually fix some of the issues that the Artemis had, including limited life items like battery recharging, various fuels and such like. Now here they were, they built a little scaffold and they put a little tent so that they could fix the quick disconnect valve where the hydrogen leaks and the seals were placed. And then they, of course, rolled it back to the VAB. They repaired, the repairs in the VAB were batteries were recharged, including those in the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, Orion, and 5 of the 10 CubeSats. They actually had 10 CubeSats. They had space for 12, only 10 got on board in the end, and 5 of those had their batteries charged. They replaced the solid rocket booster flight termination batteries and recertified the system with the Eastern range. Some damaged foam insulation was repaired, and a new launch date was set no earlier than the 14th of November. And that was all to do with this calendar that you would have seen many times that tells you how long it's all to do with moon dynamics and it tells you how long your mission will be and whether you can launch and whether you can't. In those early missions, they were basically 40-day missions and they were daylight launches. But as we shall see, that changed. Okay. And there are the CubeSats in there, and you can see, if you count them, there's 2 or 3 spare cradles sitting in there. This is the what's called the Block 1. There's an evolution of the SLS. We're currently in Block 1. Block 1 will go to Artemis 3, and then Block 1B, Artemis 4 comes into play, which is a rocket of more capability. So 5th of November, NASA rolls out the SLS again, but this time they will attempt a night launch and 25-day mission versus the 40-day mission as per previous attempts. And there it is, pre-launch. 9th of November, NASA delays the launch from the 14th to the 16th. Again, Hurricane Nicole this time. So on the 12th, after the hurricane, apparently they didn't get winds up to the rated speed of the rocket on a pad, which surprised me. I think they were something like in the order of 80 miles an hour. But they had some minor foam and cork damage, and NASA basically says, don't worry about it. We'll launch anyway. And there it is. And this was the mission profile. And it has a really interesting orbit called deep retrograde orbit that it goes into. And essentially, I'll get to that. I'll describe it in a little bit more detail in a minute, but it's an orbit that was actually designed when Orion was pretty much designed back in the early 2010s. The mission, as you recall, was to go to an asteroid. Deep space was not meant to go to the moon, but let's go through this and everything will be revealed. So the night launch window, opening at 1:04 in the morning, was 2 hours, thankfully. If it had been the 14th, would have been a 1 hour launch window, which again puts pressure on NASA to launch. So let's just watch a little bit of NASA PR.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
It's been 50 years since we've been to the moon, and we've got a great program called Artemis. We're going back. The Apollo program was a test for the American people that you can do what you set out to do. All it took was turning to it and making it happen.
We are go for a mission to the moon at this time.
Engines on 5, 4, 3, 2, all engines running. Launch commit, liftoff. We have liftoff 49 minutes past the hour.
I think the characteristic that I remember most of the Saturn V was the noise. The noise was enormous and it was almost impossible to communicate.
We're go, St. Tide, we're go.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
There are so many things that we could eventually learn about our universe and the spacecraft that we use exploring.
We are a nation of explorers. During Apollo, we were on national TV literally every day because we were doing something visible that Americans could see and they could feel and say, look what we are doing. And I believe Artemis is going to come up and say, look what we are capable of and what we are doing now.
Artemis will stand on the shoulders of Apollo. They're going to have the eyes of the world on them when they start down this trail.
The science of spaceflight is one that will continue to inspire. Going to the moon generates technology, more communications, more computer technology, more sophistication in manufacturing that help us in everyday life.
We have a generation that is ready, a generation with that technology, a generation with the education. Artemis represents the future in space. It is our next big step, and it is time to take it.
We choose to go to the moon.
Sorry. For some of the old timers here, you know, I sometimes just think about it and say, they've got a rocket there that can actually get people to the moon. And, you know, we haven't seen that since 1972. And I still think, how good is that? So pretty inspirational. Okay, the launch. Using this new gentle fuel procedure, the SLS rocket is full at the start of the launch window. That hadn't been done before. They were still mucking around with the fueling. So that was pretty cool. So they got that right on the 16th. There was a ground electrical connector. I think it was a router or something, something like that, and some loose corking, which was deemed safe. The hydrogen leak in a hydrogen fueling valve was detected. So NASA sends out its red crew to pretty much tighten up the nuts on the valve. That's exactly what they did. And NASA continues the countdown. And finally, NASA spectacularly launches the rocket about 20 minutes after the opening of the launch window. And there's the red crew going out there. This is a fully fueled rocket. Quite an explosion if it was to explode. Don't create any sparks when you tighten up the bolts. These guys go out there, 2 blokes with a safety officer, and they fix it. And we finally get the launch.
CLS, go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Testing the ability to steer the rocket into space. Launch team can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go. Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Stage engine start. 3, 2, 1.
The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars.
Would have been amazing to be there. I was there, but didn't get to the end. Yeah, there's other bits of footage where you see the launch escape system come off. So if you get onto YouTube, you can actually see some of the later videos that were sent out by NASA. It's unfortunate. I think we've become very used to SpaceX stuff. SpaceX is real high quality 4K transmission of video live. The NASA launch wasn't quite like that. Hopefully one day they will be like that. But yeah, SpaceX is a hard act to follow. There we go. So just after launch, we had the separation of the SRBs some 2 minutes later. Then we had separation of the interim cryogenic propulsion stage with the Orion stack. The perigee raise maneuver was initiated, and that basically gets you into the right orbit so you can do your systems checks. And then we went into translunar injection and Orion European service module separation. And that all happened 2 hours after launch, which was really, really quick. Fantastic. So was within 3 nautical miles of the required position for TLI. So that's pretty accurate navigation. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage actually has a single RL-10 engine. Now the RL-10 engine goes back to the 60s. That's its heritage. But this was an actual record burn for it, where it burned for 18 minutes. So new record set. And there we have the Orion service module stack separating from the ICPS. And so now Orion is transiting to the moon. And some of the pictures, of course, were just, you know, beautiful, beautiful to see. Now, one of the issues that cropped up, which was an interesting thing, after launch, NASA asked reporters not to take pictures of the mobile launch tower. So, of course, some of the reasons were cited by others as being ITAR related. You know, it's really arms regulation. You don't want to film the tower because it might have sensitive information that other people get a hold of. Trouble is, the conspiracy theories exploded. Why doesn't NASA want us to take pictures? So within 2 days, not even a day, NASA released their tower damage report. And it's worth watching. I might stop it somewhere there, but...
if we could roll the video of the drone footage of the mobile launcher, this is essentially a top-down look of the entire mobile launcher. And this is the side that faces the rocket as it lifted off. You can see all the umbilicals in the retracted position, and we will go all the way down to the deck of the mobile launcher here. And, you know, we do have a little bit of discoloration simply from the heat of the rocket, but all of the interfaces are in good shape. The mobile launcher itself it has a little bit of damage to it, but it will be ready to fly the crewed launch on Artemis II. And here we are looking down into the flame trench. The damage that we did see pertained to really just a couple of areas on the zero deck. If we could pull up the image of the elevator doors, we did. All right, so here we're seeing the image of the mobile launcher deck. We have exhaust that comes out of the solid boosters that is right at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we had a large amount of water come out of the water birds and the water sound suppression system to keep the deck protected. You can see here that the water sound suppression did a great job, with the exception of right around the edges of the flame trench. If we could go to the next photo. And here you're simply seeing some of the paint discolored and paint removed. This is the entire deck of the mobile launcher, and you see the 2 tail service mast umbilicals that are in the foreground on the right. Our launch director, Charlie Blackwell Thompson, says she walked into the tail service mast umbilicals and they were pristine inside. So all of the enclosures and all of the close-up activities to basically button this thing up as the rocket was lifting off protected all the hardware there. There's our elevator doors. The elevator system is not functioning right now. We had the world's most powerful rocket, and the pressure basically blow the doors off of our elevators. This is why it took a little longer to inspect the mobile launcher. Is a very tall structure, and right now the elevators are inoperable, and we need to get those back into service. And then if we look at the next photo, I love this photo. When I saw it, I was like, wow. This is one of the cameras on the zero deck of the mobile launcher being looked at from the 274-foot level on one of the towers. So you can see, again, the heat of the boosters scorching the camera. The camera housing survived, but it just goes to show the environment there on the zero deck is not the friendliest when you have the world's most powerful rocket lifting off. Again, that said, we did a thorough inspection of the mobile launcher, and it has passed. The only items that are noteworthy of damage are the ones that I've shown you there. We did have 2 cameras out. We also did have some damage to pneumatic lines associated with gaseous nitrogen and gaseous helium, and that in turn caused the oxygen sensors on the pad to show that there were low oxygen readings until we got the leaks in the pneumatic lines isolated, which is why it took a little longer to gain access out at the pad. That was overall, again, a very clean system. The exploration ground systems exceeded our performance. We did have a little bit of damage, and the mobile launcher will be ready to support Artemis 2, and we had accounted for that.
Okay, so NASA comes clean, and he's a good talker. But I must tell you, that's probably as frank an explanation as I've heard from him. And I suspect this conspiracy theories of the day earlier would have prompted NASA to do that. I don't think they'll be making those edicts without thinking it through again, which is good.
If we could.
Okay, so we have the transit coast to the moon, 16th of November to the 22nd. And again, spectacular pictures come from the mission. Oh, that's Fox weather. That can't be false news, can it? Where are the stars? Okay, so here are some pictures inside, and I was told that the screen in the middle is actually an iPad. So that's pretty cool. And there's one of the... and
the distances on the screen are in miles.
Moving on. Now, one of the gravity meters that they had, one of 2, was Snoopy, of course, and that was the NASA gravometer. And then, of course, we had the ESA one, Shaun the Sheep. Great vision, great pictures. So now it's time to get into lunar orbit, 22nd of November to the 25th. we go into this deep retrograde orbit. So it's deep because it goes further than any other man-rated spacecraft has ever gone. Apollo, till today, Apollo 13 held that record of 65,000 kilometers from the moon. So it surpassed that today. It's retrograde because Orion travels and swings around the moon opposite to the direction that the moon travels around the Earth. If you see the pictures, you'll see it getting in, but moving the opposite direction to the orbit. So the 22nd of November, Orion arrives at the moon. As it swings around the moon, the Earth was hidden behind the moon, and it goes into a 34-minute loss of signal. Whilst on the opposite side of the moon, Orion performs the outbound powered flyby, which is a 2.5-minute burn of its main engine, which incidentally is a space shuttle orbital maneuvering engine. It was given to the Europeans to put into their service module. And it puts it onto a trajectory that would allow it, following a second burn, to get into this DRO orbit around the moon. And this is just before it went into loss of signal. You can see the Earth is just slowly sneaking behind the moon. There were pictures that were obviously taken as they went around, but I can remember watching this live and just waiting that 34 minutes saying, is this thing going to pop out, or we'll never hear from it again? So, but these are some of the pictures. They're not as good as, because these were transmitted down, but when we get the proper high definition pictures, I'm sure they'll be as stunning as, say, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter pictures. And of course, they went around the old Apollo launch sites. I think the lowest point, which was about 81 miles odd, was around the Apollo 11 landing site. Where was it? Okay, I believe you.
It was about 1,200 kilometres above the Apollo 11.
Was it? Okay, I believe you, Andrew. He's our space dynamics expert in the association, so I'm not going to argue with him, that's for sure. On the 25th of November, Orion performed the second manoeuvre and finally entered DRO. At this time, NASA officials reported that Artemis was overall performing well. As soon as they said that, of course, there was one little glitch. They actually had a loss of contact with Orion, but it was, I'll explain it. The link was lost for about 47 minutes. And the reason was that they were reconfiguring a link between Orion and the Deep Space Network. They hadn't had it happen before, but it's something that they're still looking into. Okay. So why use this weird once only use DRO orbit? Because they're never going to use it again, pretty much as far as we can tell. Well, this is courtesy of Marcus House. He explains it.
Be wondering why this orbit was chosen in the first place. It certainly got a lot of interest this week. You would think that Orion would enter a low lunar orbit, exit it, and then return. Why instead this very odd-looking DRO orbit shown in this great animation here? It does the first powered flyby and kind of just hangs out in this interesting balance point between the moon and the Earth. It then performs another small powered maneuver to then dive back in to loop around the moon and almost freefall back towards Earth. It's all very complicated looking, isn't it? Well, it's rather elegant and by necessity, and it's because this service module simply doesn't have the needed delta V to do much more. It needs to instead hang out in this high orbit to save fuel. It's a much less capable vehicle than the Saturn V and Apollo vehicles, which could do a low lunar orbit and return quite fine. SLS might be more powerful, but in this current configuration, it can only put 95 metric tons into low Earth orbit. Saturn V, in comparison, could do around 140 tons, I believe.
Okay, so Marcus is basically saying that the Orion capsule and the service module does not have the capability to maneuver around the moon like Apollo. And it's a reason for that.
Be wondering why the
Okay. The DRO orbit, though, is a very stable orbit that allows NASA to basically test the spacecraft thoroughly. And it doesn't require much fuel to basically station keep. And that's the reasoning behind the decision to use it, because they don't have enough fuel, so they don't want to use the little they have. It allows a sufficiently long time to test out Orion's systems, such as guidance, nav, comms, power and thermal control, without drifting off course and worrying about the drift. DRO was intended for deep space asteroid retrieval missions. I heard, and I don't know if this was right, but they had intended to place the recovered asteroids into this particular orbit, and apparently they can stay in that orbit for a century, so I'm led to believe. So maybe Andrew might at one point do some research and see if that's true or not, but that's a pretty stable orbit. Orion is simply not capable of maneuvering to low lunar orbit, unlike Apollo, even though Apollo could really only maneuver in the equatorial regions. It couldn't do the polar stuff that is being planned for Artemis. Whilst SLS will be upgraded to Block 1B and will be a more powerful rocket, the reality, it doesn't make a lot of difference to Orion's ability to actually go directly to lunar orbit. Hence, the need for the Lunar Gateway. And there's your justification for the Lunar Gateway. NASA didn't really tell us that over 5 years that they were proposing the gateway, but that is the reason for it. And these are the evolutions of the SLS. Yeah, but I don't think. Yeah, Len just commented about there are other stable, more stable, probably as equal stable orbits around the moon. Yeah, but the problem is that Orion cannot achieve those orbits. They need something to get them down there. And the way they rationalized it was to have the gateway. Anyway, moving on. This is the new exploration upper stage that is being developed. And here is the Lunar Gateway. All right. Now, DRO, the 25th to the 30th, it's our time period now. 27th, Artemis 1 went further, as I said, than Apollo 13. On the 28th, which is today, probably be tomorrow morning for us, it will set a new record of 432,000 kilometres from the moon, which beats the Apollo 13 record by about 30,000 kilometres. The testing that will be undertaken, and I thought this was interesting, it's worth going through because you wonder why are they in the DRO orbit and what exactly are they doing out there? Well, it turns out they're doing a lot. The first is a modal survey. So what they're basically going to do is the reaction control systems will be firing and check out how Orion, the SM reacts, and if it's synchronized with the nav system. So that's important because it's got to be certified, and by the time you send astronauts, you really have to rely on this system. So that's a few tests. Optical camera certification, they've got 2 star trackers there. In case all the navigation goes berserk, they still got trackers that can take the task. Solar array wing camera Wi-Fi. They have a local Wi-Fi system. The cameras that are on the wings have got a local Wi-Fi. So the idea is to really do a strength measurement, check around the spacecraft to see what can and can't be done and how they can optimize images. There's crew module service module survey, using cameras to check out the spacecraft for debris damage or micrometeorites. After Columbia, this has become, one of the top priorities of flying spacecraft, manned spacecraft. You need to do a check of the spacecraft. So they'll be checking out that system. Large file delivery protocol uplinks. So they'll be sending up large files to see what the speed and the time is, because that's going to optimize data transfer from the deep space network and other networks. They're going to do star tracker thermal assessments. The sun will heat up the various star trackers, and you need to understand the thermal dynamics of those systems. Radiator loop flow control. Again, these are two thermal control loops that they use on the system. There's a speed mode and a control mode. One is auto mode, if you like, and one is a fine control mode. They're going to do solar array wing plume tests. In other words, fire the reaction control system thrusters, see what heat does to the various solar panels to make sure there's no bad things come out of that. Propellant slosh, of course, that happens on a lot of these type of rocket tests. Just when you fire your engine, see how the propellant sloshes around in the tank. Search and acquire track mode. It tests an algorithm to recover and maintain communication after loss of comms or navigation or power failure. I mean, if you get hit by lightning and your power fails totally, you want algorithms that'll get you back online. Others, tests being undertaken, integrated search and rescue satellite aided tracking. They've got a beacon on the Orion, and 1 hour after splashdown, it activates, and they just want to make sure it's communicating to ground stations. So they don't lose an Orion. Entry aero functionality. It's the ability of the 19 reaction control thrusters to control the capsule during atmospheric and extreme heat re-entry. So they want to see how well they can actually control the attitude of the capsule. The ammonia boiler restart testing, the thermal control system. Now, as Orion is a deep space spacecraft, the life support system will thoroughly be tested. The system removes CO2 and humidity and is recycled, much like the ISS. Toilets, consumables, as far as can be without a real crew. Don't know how you do that, but where there's a will, there's a way, I suppose. And that's what Snoopy's there for. One of the main activities that they really want to get on top of is the heat shield will be tested. It'll re-enter at 25,000 miles an hour, which is Mark 32. That's a lot. With temperatures up to 5,000. I don't know if you noticed, but on the launch, Seraphine said that there was 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the launch. Well, this will go to 5,000, and it's got an ablative shield, of course, to protect it. But everyone will be holding their breath when this thing comes in at lunar entry velocities. Not like the first Artemis launch, which was re-entered from low Earth orbit at about 5,000 miles an hour. So that'll be something to see. Thermal protection, they range from minus 150 degrees to 550 degrees. So you've got an overall delta of about 700, and you just want to make sure that the spacecraft can handle those heat and thermal loads whilst in space. The big one, another big one, is radiation. There are 2 phantom torsos, mannequins with just a torso and a head, no arms or legs, are seated in 2 of the Orion seats. They are named Helga and Zoa. They have a torso made of materials that mimic a woman's soft tissue, organs, and bones, along with 5,600 sensors and 34 radiation detectors to measure how much radiation they get during the mission. Now, unfortunately, this is a 25-day mission. As I said, the earlier attempts were 40 days. That would have given them more data. Apollo didn't have any data, real good radiation data. They avoided the radiation belts and all sorts of things during their trajectories. But this is really important for the ability of astronauts to survive high radiation events like solar flares and stuff like that. I'm not sure if NASA's got all this sorted out yet, but this will become an issue. This will be a real issue. Okay, so coming up from the 1st to the 4th, DRO departure. So on the 1st of December, they will depart the DRO with a burn, and then finally they will do an exit maneuver and head back to Earth. Again, they'll do a low pass. On the 5th to the 11th, they'll be in the return transit mode. And on the 11th of December, they will re-enter, splashdown, and recover. And they get recovered by a ship like that. The frogmen go in, attach a line to it, and they pretty much drag it into the back of the ship. And then he said, we'll have the launch pad ready by Artemis 2. He made it sound like it was tomorrow. Well, it's not. Artemis 2 is May 2024, year and a half away. It's all cash flow driven, if you want to know the reason for this. Okay, so that was Artemis. Anyway, great to see the mission going, and I know a lot of us like to critique it heavily and say it's a, you know, $4.1 billion per launch is a little bit excessive, but boy, it's good to see a rocket that can actually get people to the moon flying again. Now we'll talk about the other big rocket, and that's SpaceX Starship and Super Heavy. That's a comparison. These are some statistics. I won't go through them. I use them on most of the time I put these slides up, but it's with the new Raptor 2s and 33 Raptors in the first stage, it's got a 17 million pound thrust, which is twice the Saturn V's. So its takeoff thrust is enormous. And this is kind of a spatial view of Starship. And the various configurations, you know, cargo, fuel tanker, lunar lander, etc., etc. Now, this is Starbase. This is where they're making all this down at in Texas, and that's right at the bottom corner. I was lucky enough to get there. Again, hot, humid, but it's an interesting place right on the Rio Grande there. And you can see where the big rockets are being built. And there's the two parts. There's a launch site right near the beach, and I mean literally at the beach. 300 metres away is the beach that the locals from Brownsville use. And hence you've got to manage that as part of the complications of launching from that particular site, by the way. It's only one road in, one road out. And there we have the production site. We have what's called the rocket garden, but SpaceX probably call it the rocket graveyard. We have booster 8, booster 4, serial number 15. That was the first one to actually land. The ones before it all blew up, as you can recall. And sorry, back to that slide. And that sits there. You can basically go within 5 meters of those rockets and take pictures. Brilliant. Oops, go back. All right, progress continues. That's good. Pace has slowed down though in recent months. Why? The static 5 Raptor engines recently undertaken for Ship 24 and Booster 8, and I'll explain why. Pad damage has resulted. So not only are NASA copping it, but SpaceX are as well. How could they not see this coming? Now, I don't know, that's not a rhetorical question. It's just SpaceX just, you know, they test, explode, learn, retest. But sometimes they just can't see the basic things coming. And you'll see a little bit more. By the way, this is the current status of where the construction bills for the booster and the Starship, the orbiting component, are at Starbase. And you can see that Ship 24 and Booster 7 are pretty much at the pad, ready for flight. Here's serial number 24, sorry, Ship 24, static fire test, all 6 engines. That rocket, I'll stop it there. Oh no, you'll see a few more shots. Okay. That rocket literally is very low to the ground. There is no thrust deflector. So what does it do? It blasts the concrete underneath. All the concrete shoots up in the air. It damages the launch structure, and worse still, it can damage the engines. This is why I say, couldn't SpaceX foresee this coming? Everyone's been talking about it for the last 4 years, you know, and still SpaceX is struggling with it. I think they know, but they're trying to find out what they can get away with. That's the truth of it. The less they spend, the less they do, the better, the cheaper the product will be. And now I'll show you the booster 7 firing. 14 engines. Watch the bits fly. Right, so we had 14 engines fire there, and that's higher on the launch table, but still a big issue. Right, moving on. Okay, so you'll see that's not very far off the ground. That's just that ignition point for the Starship 24, and it made a bit of a mess. And same with the booster. Whilst it's a bit higher, it also made a bit of a mess. And there's bits flying. Yep. Probably right. Len said someone had probably suggested it to Elon, but they got fired. It's pretty mind-boggling. And the tower is quite a mess. Now, they've been coming back retrospectively and fitting protection around the pipes and whatever. But again, why couldn't you see this coming? The most important change, though, is they're ripping up the concrete underneath, and they're using a new product called, what's it called? Fondag. And it has a high compressive strength. It's highly impact resistant. And most importantly, it can take really high temperatures, which is exactly what you want in conditions like this. And it dries quickly. But, you know, people have been talking about flame trenches for a while. SpaceX have just stayed away from it. Again, the structure has been pretty well damaged. They're putting plates around it. A repaint can fix a lot of that, but the concrete needs doing. At the Cape, they've also got a new pad at 39A, but in this pad, they've actually got water jets down at the bottom. So they think that that might solve the problem. I'm a little bit dubious about that, but at least at the Cape, they've got a system. Down at Boca, it's kind of just add bits as you go and see what happens. The tower itself is getting protected with steel plates, and you'll notice there's gaps in there for expansion as the flame hits it. When 33 Raptors ignite, let me tell you, at twice the power of a Saturn V, it might even melt the whole thing. Who knows? So it's a real issue for them. The other thing is they've been putting scaffold around the Starship. Why are they doing that? The scaffold is now up to just below the top fins. And the reason is they did a compression test on a test cylinder. And what they found was, holy cow, it buckled. So what do you need? Strength. And I think what the reason for those is, and you can see the bands, the big silver band at the halfway point, and then a few others, that's to strengthen the structure, retrospectively strengthen structure. So SpaceX continue to achieve its milestones with the human landing system contract, even though we don't see much. NASA recently predicted that the first Starship orbital suborbital launch would occur as soon as December. Elon had said previously that it could have happened in November. November's out of the question. I am starting to doubt whether December is even achievable. The ground systems and further static fires will be required. They really haven't gone into the full launch campaign of static fires yet, and the ground systems are still being repaired. Another key factor is they need to get FAA approval. It had 80 plus conditions that they had to meet before they could even apply for a launch permit. We don't know what's going on with those. We hear very little about it. So until that happens, they will not be flying. And when they do fly, they basically got enough energy to get into orbit, but they deliberately use a suborbital profile. But the suborbital is from Texas around the world, splash down in Hawaii for the Starship, whilst the booster actually splashes down in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is the Hawaii splashdown. They won't attempt to recover it, but they'll obviously try to reignite the engines on the way down to test the performance. Now, Cape Canaveral, Florida, what's happening down there? When the FAA stepped in and gave him the 80 conditions plus, Elon Musk basically said, forget about Boca Chica, we're going to the Cape where I've got a permit. And so what he did immediately was he started to construct a Starship launch tower at the Cape. However, then NASA stepped in and said, we don't want you to be flying Starships out of there because you blow up our only pad that can launch men into the ISS, will hurt us bad. We're not going back to the Russians to get another ride. So in response to that, pad number 40 is the current other pad that SpaceX use. They're now going to man rate that. So that's happening as we speak. They're upgrading that. However, it's more than that. Moving on. Sorry. This is a picture of Roberts Road. Roberts Road is about 5 kilometres from pad 39A. It's on the visitor centre. If people are familiar with the Cape, you've got to go past the barrier there, and then to the left, past the visitor centre is pretty much Roberts Road. You can't get on there. The only way you get to see these views is to fly with a helicopter, which I did when I was there, but the guy that took these pictures, Greg Scott, great guy, he does this continually every week. He takes these pictures. But what you can see there is you can see the new Starship factory being built, and they've gone pretty rapidly on that. Just behind it, middle right, you'll see the foundations of what will be another integration bay, a big one, but they haven't started on that yet. But in the middle, to the left, you'll see these. They've actually got 5 new sections to another launch pad, Starship launch pad. So where do these go? By the way, in these pictures, you'll see that the launch pad at 39A has very small chopstick arms. And people have been saying, why the short chopsticks arms? If you're going to capture a booster, you don't want short ones. The latest theory is they're not going to be landing Starships on pad 39A. So you don't need chopsticks that are really big, because all you need is small ones to pick up the booster, put it on the launch pad and fire it. So that's the reason probably behind it. But the third launch pad is now being built, but where's that going to go? This is the current state of play of where we are with the what's called the orbital launch mount number 2, number 1 being at Boca, number 2 being at the Cape, and number 3 is under construction. And here's one of the latest theories. That launch pad will go to landing zone 1. So you might be able to launch from there, but it's more likely you're there to capture the rocket, because to build the infrastructure into landing zone 1, which was the old SLAC 13, would be very expensive, and it's unlikely to happen. So the theory is pad 39A will be launched, landing zone 1, 2 will be landing. Yeah, Dave asks, can the road infrastructure support those loads? Well, the answer is that when they move the Starships from Roberts Road to Pad 39A, they've actually requested NASA, asked NASA if they can upgrade the roads near the VAB. So chances are SpaceX are aware of it, and if they have to, they will upgrade the roads. Remember, these are empty boosters at the end, so coming back from landing zone 1 might not be such a bigger problem as but it's still, you've got to make sure the roads can take it. There's landing zone 1, and they're probably going to put the pad there. And this is a picture of where it is at the Cape. It's just not very far from Blue Origin, I might add. Blue Origin is on pad 36, which is just a little bit up from the landing zone. I hope they don't confuse the landing sites. And these are the old launch pads there. And SpaceX used 39A, 40 and 13. Blue Origin used 36, ULA used 41. I'll fill out that table and I'll put Relativity Space and a few others that have now got a presence down at the Cape. And but there was an old rumor, because if you go back to the previous slide, if you look at the very top, you'll see Launch Complex 39C and 39D, or the advanced Saturn launch pads. They were never built, but that area was slated for those big rockets. So there was a time when I thought they're going to put a new Starship launch site there. They may still very well do it in the end, but not at the moment by the looks of it. Of course, the SpaceX have got a contract with the US military to study point-to-point movement of cargo and troops. You know, an hour response time anywhere in the world. That's very attractive to the military. And the oil platforms, everything has gone dead. I know they're being refurbished somewhere, but I think Elon Musk has again pivoted, as he does regularly, and he's moved to really establishing the Cape as the prime launch, prime landing site. Boca will be kept for development work. And I love this one. Someone came up with a super duper Starship, and that would be something to see. Okay, let's go to commercial crew. And the next one is Boeing CST-100. Where are we with the CST-100? There's a Starliner. You've seen these pictures before. Interior, not as slick as SpaceX's Crew Dragon, but hey, it's not bad. So Boeing have launched OFT-1. That was pretty much a dismal failure. On the 19th, at its own cost, they launched OF2. It also had problems. Early 2023, we've got a crewed OFT3 flight coming up. Was February, but has now slipped to April. So unfortunately, this thing just can't win a trick. And then most likely you won't get operational missions till 2024. By then, SpaceX will have completed its original contract of 6 missions anyway. So Boeing are just years and years behind. Was originally hoped to be operational by 2017, but has been plagued by delays. OFT-1 was cut short due to an onboard clock timer issue, believe it or not, which caused thrusters to fire inadvertently and do all sorts of stuff. Knocked it off course. A lot came out of that. But NASA also started to look at itself. Where was their oversight? How was this allowed to happen? They tried another launch attempt, and they were almost on the pad in August 21, but they had some stuck valves, which probably, I think, turned out to be corrosion on the valves. I wonder if being near the ocean has anything to do with it. Maybe. They still, I believe, haven't definitively discovered what caused it. So basically for the OFT-2 flight, they just changed to another service module. It was eventually launched in May, still problems. Boeing is now in the process of closing out the anomalies, and verification of several critical systems are ongoing. And they're getting ready to fly astronauts on the next mission. 2 astronauts will go up. Crewed launch was expected in Feb, now is in April, as I said. It'll basically certify, that's the intention, certify the spacecraft for launch. Boeing cited one of the reasons why it slipped from February to April was because of to deconflict visiting spacecraft to the ISS. There's probably an element of truth in that, but I'm not sure it's the total truth and nothing but the truth. Okay, so up until this point, SpaceX are the only commercial spacecraft, US spacecraft, certified to fly humans to the ISS. By the way, Boeing have absorbed $883 million because it was a lump sum contract, right? Performance-based contract. And Boeing haven't been able to achieve it. And they've forked out $500 million just to fly another mission, let alone the other costs that have basically compiled. So Boeing are hurting. It wouldn't surprise me if they keep talking about, let's get out of this contract. But the truth of the matter is they can't lose faith with NASA, and it would have a bigger impact on Boeing in terms of the US Air Force and military. So they're in a real bind, but they've lost, you know, almost $1 billion. There it is. This is what it looks like. There's a launch, separation in space. There's some mannequins in there. And that was the OFT. The next one is United Launch Alliance. These are all new systems coming on stream. Is it okay? You want me to stop? Your call. Very, very short, very quick. Vulcan rocket. ULA are building that. They finally took delivery of their second flight-worthy BE-4 from Blue Origin, and it's quickly been installed. It has been problematic in development, as you know, the BE-4, and Tory Bruno from ULA finally got his engines and put it promptly into the rocket. So BE-4 is the largest American rocket, slightly more powerful than the Raptor 2, it turns out, but it's still going through its testing because they're going to use it for the Blue Origin New Glenn. BE-4 is a methane, natural gas, liquid oxygen engine. Vulcan rocket is targeting delivery to Kennedy Space Center by the end of this year. Don't know if they'll make it, but they might. First launch is targeted for Q1 2023. Will be a good test for Blue Origin because they'll fly their engines on somebody else's rocket. Perfect. The first mission of the Vulcan rocket is to launch the astrobotic lander to the moon. The second mission will then fly the uncrewed Dream Chaser to the ISS. And there it is in February 21. That's just the Pathfinder. And this is BE-4 being tested. This is the BE-4 second flight with the engine arriving. And there it is installed. So they'll be taking that out of the hangar and bringing it to the Cape very shortly. And this is the ULA Centaur 5 structural test article, which is at Marshall getting tested, because that also fits on top of the Vulcan, and that's a second stage. And there's the astrobotic Peregrine lander scheduled to fly on that in Q1 23. And of course, Dream Chaser coming up. Give me 5 minutes and I'm done. Blue Origin, they're building the New Glenn, and that's in the factory in Florida. There's lots of factory upgrades going on. So Blue Origin is serious. Always lots of cars at the factory. When I was there, I was actually surprised by the number of cars that were there. It meant there were people inside the building doing something. Space Launch Complex 36 appears to be complete and ready to go. First launch is expected in late 23. B4 engines, as I said, will be trialled on Vulcan, and obviously Blue Origin will be very keen to see how they perform. And there you have comparison of New Glenn to the Saturn, and that's the size of the Blue Origin B4 engine, slightly bigger than a Raptor 2, but very powerful. And these are the upgrades. This is the main building. You can see the main entries to the center with a canopy over it. And to the left, this is one of the structures that are test stands that are going in there. And to the left, they're building more supply containment areas. And, so Blue Origin are really putting a bit of effort. This is just behind the visitor center at Kennedy Space Center. You can drive around it, but you can't get this view unless you're in a helicopter. There's a Pathfinder going out. There's it sitting on the pad. There's the pad. And that's the real picture. That's the real picture. And they were going to recover their boosters on the ship. Well, that's been scrapped. They've sold that, went past SpaceX launch site at Boca Chica to the scrapyard. Sierra Nevada, I'll quickly go. I don't want to labor on this, but this is second flight of Vulcan. So towards the middle to the end of next year, we'll see this going up. And Sierra Nevada are doing a great job of this particular spacecraft. There's a little bit of history there. I want to race through this. These are bits about the contract. There it is. And I'll show you the latest pictures of it. But it's really there to first satisfy the NASA contract of cargo resupply number 2 contract. That'll start next year. But it's more importantly, the manned-rated version will service what's known as the orbital reef, which is a Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, Boeing consortium to put this private space station into space. So one day, you never know, you might be able to take a trip in that, because I'm sure they'll sell seats. And there it is. So at the moment, Tenacity, the first of the Dream Chasers, is now having its tiles put on. Looks great. And there's Shooting Star, which is the unpressurized cargo module that attaches to the Dream Chaser. And of course, it launches on the Vulcan rocket. So 2023, last bit. Human landing system. On the 16th of November, NASA awarded a contract to SpaceX to produce another lunar lander, the sustainable version of it, which means they're going to fly Artemis 3, first lunar lander, and then this one for Artemis 4. And that's pretty cool. It's part of their contract. They had allowed for it under a, what do they call it? A phase B option. NASA took up the option. So we'll see 2 lunar landings by SpaceX. And surprisingly enough, I haven't heard a lot about the human landing system for SpaceX, but NASA keep praising SpaceX for achieving its milestones. So it's doing something right, but we just don't see it. It was under option B that they awarded this contract. So they basically received another $1.15 billion for it, which adds to the $2.89 billion, but I believe there's a bit of other few dollars that went to SpaceX. Remember, this was half of what the national team, which was the Blue Origin costs were. So that was the first award. Great. The second award was NASA in September requested proposals for a second non-SpaceX lunar lander as a backup. And they're going to fast track this. They're going to award next year. So the deadline is November 15. They probably got the proposals now. They're going through them, but the idea is to award in May of 2023. So we will have 2 lunar landing contracts, which is smart move because you don't want to rely on one. And then based on how this performs, and they won't fly any earlier than Artemis 5, NASA will then buy services off each commercial company, either SpaceX or this lander, or both. So these are some of the landers, and there's Dynetics. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Is that all? You wanted me to go? I've got some previous slides about it.
Just to follow up for Angela's presentation, which is fantastic, that landing of the Artemis capsule will be on December 12th, which is the same day as our last meeting for the year, about 7 a.m. So if you want to chat. And also, I've been over to Fox News, and their renowned news hounds have been able to get inside information at NASA, and actually saw a document. They saw some leaked footage, and apparently that that communication blackout with the Artemis, it came from the Australian tracking station. They had a power outage, and someone forgot to prime the backup generator, and they made a documentary about it. So you got it from me first. Thank you. Exactly. Oh, that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. I don't think she's still on. She had to go and look after her children. Thank you, Sally, for that impromptu, rehearsal presentation. And thank you, Angela. It was fantastic. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a whole bunch of stuff over here donated to us from an associate of ours. It's a silent auction, no minimum bid. So if you want anything at all, have a look around. There's some sheets here you can fill out your name or whatever, or just come and talk to me, and that'll be, because we're about to get out of here now. So, so the Blu-rays donated by Len, and some books and posters and signed autographed posters, including Bruce McCandless and a couple of other astronauts. So worthwhile taking home if you can get it. Ashley, thanks again, once again, for all your fabulous work. Ashley drives all out from Gippsland every meeting and sets everything up and drives all the way home again. So big effort from Angela. And Michael's the coordinator. Thanks for getting it all done and getting Saber Astronautics. And that's it from us, and we'll see you on the 12th of December.
You can all